Did you know that grizzly bears used to be a prairie species? Some of their favorite foods include roots, berries, and shrubs. Today's lesson is on one of my favorite topics, ecosystems and their diversity. So within the environment, organisms can interact with both biotic, living, or abiotic, non-living factors in their environment. And within an ecosystem, we can study one of the many systems on a variety of levels. We can study the individual. So, as a scientist, we might follow one caribou or one tamarack tree throughout their lifespan. We can study the population. So, a group of caribou living in a certain area or a group of tamarack trees. We can study the species as a whole. So, all of the caribou within a large region. So, in Western Canada or in the Yukon versus one specific group of them, or the community. So, how the caribou interact with the ecosystem around them, the wolves, the lichen, the flies, and the birds. So, ecologists who study individuals are primarily concerned with how the environment affects the behavior and physical characteristics of an organism. So, we're looking at how that environment affects maybe one organism, if there's a fire, if there's a drought, or if there's a plague. Ecologists who study populations study why the size and composition of a population changes with time. So we might look at the herd of caribou within Banff National Park or Jasper National Park and what factors are going to drive those changes, whether it's predation, whether it's human interactions, or whether it's the weather. Ecologists who study communities look at the interaction between many species and how these interactions affect populations. So is it the wolves? Is it humans? Is it drought? Is it snowfall that is affecting the caribou in that region? So abiotic or non-living factors also change over time. So water, sunlight, and chemical composition of the environment. Also, one population within the ecosystem changes, other populations that interact with them will also change. So, as the population of wolves go up, the population of elk in Yellowstone will go down, which causes the scrub brush and trees around water bodies to go up in the Yellowstone National Park, which will then allow for more birds, small mammals, and rodents to take up habitat in those locations. So populations are also able to change their environment over time, particularly after a major change to that habitat. So if there's a major change in that habitat, populations might move or they might alter their behavior in relation to that. So, an ecosystem encompasses all of the living and non living parts of an environment. So, all the species, plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, microbes that live somewhere, and all the non living parts, the rocks, the water, the air, and the minerals. However, an environment can vary in size. So, we might have a really small pond, or we might have Jasper National Park, or we might have the boreal forest in northern Canada. The biosphere is the largest possible ecosystem. So that encompasses everything on Earth where living things can be found, from the animals and plants at the deepest part of the ocean to how high up in the atmosphere birds might fly and the highest plant life up on mountains. So every species has its own place or role in the biosphere. The distribution of this species is related to the way that abiotic and biotic components affect the ability of that species to survive. And this is called a species habitat, where it lives, and its niche, its role in that habitat. So within any given biome, whether it's the desert, the prairie, coral reefs, the tundra, there's a huge amount of varied vegetation and terrain. So there's a number of different habitats that can be created to suit the requirements of different organisms. So even if we look on the prairies, we have those little clumps of brush that are going to be habitat for certain species. We're going to have sloughs that are going to be habitat for ducks and frogs. We're going to have hills that are dry that are habitat for gophers. So even within the prairie biome, there's lots of different places and habitats for organisms to live. So related to a species' habitat is its range. So where is that species found on a map or on the globe? So we can look at the spread of grizzly bears, which primarily now habit the mountains, but previously used to habit prairies as well. So, not all places within a range will have suitable habitat for these organisms. So, again, if we look at, say, grizzly bears in the mountains, they're not going to live all throughout their range. They're not going to live in the town of Banff. They're not going to live high above the tree line. So, they still need to find their particular habitat within that range. But their range may change as humans interfere or modify the environment. We add roads, we add railways, we add towns, we add ski lifts. And so this is all going to change the habitat and range where a species might appear. So again, we look at this map of grizzly bear habitat, and you can see that grizzly bears used to cover most of the prairies of Canada all the way down, even into Mexico, where there was suitable habitat in that range, where now they're primarily relegated to the mountains, and we can see a dark green patch in the United States, and that's where Yellowstone National Park is. But again, within their current range today, they're not found in every single habitat because there's some that are not suitable for their survival. Yeah, and since 1850, the range of the grizzly bear has greatly decreased because of farming and settler needs. So we eliminated using force the grizzly bears in that area, as well as their habitats changed, where grizzly bears aren't going to find suitable food forage necessarily in cropland where they used to find in native prairies, where there was berries and gophers and small rodents for them to hunt and eat. So, an ecological niche is the role an animal plays in its environment. So, although many species have the same range, they might even have the same habitat, they have different niches. And trouble or conflict occurs between organisms when they occupy each other's niche or one niche is destroyed. So, such as the mountain pine beetle destroying pine trees. So, when those pine trees are destroyed, it's changing the entire habitat of the area. So a niche is determined by the available biotic and abiotic factors. So again, living and non-living factors. In aquatic environments, the amount of available light is often the main determining factor of the available niches. So we have areas of the water where there's lots of light, a little bit of light, and then no light at all. And each zone of this lake is going to have a distinct group of organisms. So we have the littoral zone, and there's more information on the next slide, where there's shallow, warm water and lots of light. So often this is where we'll see rooted plants, some reaching the surface, some not reaching the surface. We see lots of minnows, frogs, snails, small fish. This is often the entire depth of a slough we'll see as the littoral zone. The limnetic zone here is open water, where there's still lots of light. We'll have floating plants, and this is often where larger fish will live because it's deeper, there's more room for them. The profundal zone is dark, cold water where there's mainly decomposers. So not a lot of light reaches here, which means there won't be a lot of fish as well. The benthic zone is going to be mud or sand. There's little or no light, decomposers, filter feeders, and worms. So this is, again, the bottom of the lake. So here we see that information about the littoral zone, which again is going to be where we see most of our sloughs. The limnetic zone, which is the open water where there's lots of light. This is where we like to go boating if we're boating, often where we'll go fishing if we're fishing. The profundal zone, which is mainly decomposers, it's dark, cold water. And the benthic zone, the bottom of a lake where no light reaches, where we have mainly decomposers. In a terrestrial environment, there's lots of diversity as well. The biodiversity in these ecosystems also depends on the biotic and abiotic factors. So some of the biotic and abiotic factors that affect terrestrial ecosystems are going to be the amount of water and the amount of light that an area receives. So if we look at the boreal forest, we get decent amount of water, so trees are able to survive, but not as much light as we do in southern climates. So that affects the type of trees and the diversity versus the Amazon rainforest, which gets a lot of light and a lot of moisture. So it has a much higher diversity than other ecosystems. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson as much as I did. Catch you next time. Bye.
If you enjoyed this video, check out our website, online.plrd.ab.ca. and visit us on Facebook, Prairieland Online Academy. You can find out all that's going on with Prairieland Online Academy.